So coming up next, we will have Mr. Hashim Padiyath, and he has the background of computer science and also the communication design. So he would like to talk about the Malayalam letterforms. Welcome.
Hello, it's nice to be here. I had attended ATypI around 28 years back in The Hague. Then I was a spectator sitting on the other side. Now I'm on this side. Interesting for me. So I'm going to speak to you about Malayalam letter forms, the geometrical forms that makes it. So let's have a look. So I come from a land, it's a land of hundreds of languages, and it has equal number of scripts as well, even though officially we have only about 18. And I come from a land that is very small. It's about, say, sliver of a land that's in the southernmost tip of India, Kerala. So this is Kerala. It's a very green, tropical land with a beautiful seacoast like what Australia has. And the language that we speak in Kerala is Malayalam. It's being spoken by around 45 million people all over the world. Kerala is a beautiful land with a lot of green, lush green hills and tropical forests. And we also have beautiful backwaters intertwined with the land. It's fabled for spices. In fact, the whole spice trade and the European this one trade started off in Kerala when they came to look for its spices, which is black pepper, cardamom, and more. And it has a rich, varied culture which still survives, and a beautiful script. So that is Malayalam, and if you have seen it, this is probably the longest palindrome in English as well. It treats Malayalam from both sides. So it's a unique case alpha syllabary abugida script, as you call it. And if you look at its origins, well, all Indian languages are believed to have originated from the Indus Valley. That's around 3,000 years before the Christian era. But we still don't know much about the Indus Valley script, because some people say it's a script, some people say they're just symbols, because nobody has really identified or deciphered the script yet. But it's beautiful. And yes, it looks beautiful. It uses these beautiful symbols in it. And it could be a script, we still don't know. But the identifiable script that is from which all Indian scripts originate, like in the morning, Muthu was speaking about, was Brahmi, which goes back to the 3rd century before the Christian era. And that is a very geometric kind of script. You could see triangles, circles, squares, all in them. And most of the Indian scripts, or rather the many of these Asian scripts originated from that. You can see that, in the 5th century it came to Siddham, Nagari, Pallava, Grantha, Vattezhuthu, Kadamba, and all. 8th to 18th century, Devanagari came, and some other South Asian scripts came, Ahom, Arakanese, Old Khmer, Old Mon, and everything, and also Kannada as well. And in the present day, it has given rise to so many scripts which is being used all across the subcontinent. So if you look at the south of India, there are 4 scripts in India: Malayalam 1, Kannada, Telugu, and we also have one in Sri Lanka, that is Sinhala. These are all closely related, all have the same origins. And if you look at when they originated, you can see that it starts from Brahmi, and so it's split into 2, Tamil Brahmi and Southern Brahmi. And from one of these Brahmis, they separated and then combined, and it became Vattezhuthu, Grantha, and both gave birth to the script called Malayalam. That is around 1200 before Christian era. 1200 in Christian era. So the original script from which all these 3 scripts, Tamil, Malayalam, and Sinhala, originated is called Vattezhuthu. It's a little roundish form, and they used to engrave it on copper plates because no other mediums was available at the time. And around the same time when they wanted to write Sanskrit, they found that Vattezhuthu was not enough, so they used another script called Grantha, and they used to engrave it on stone with chisels. So again, that is also quite roundish. There is also another source for Malayalam. Moving on, Tamil script got formalized around 7th century Christian era, and this is how it looks. And if you see both Brahmi, Grantha, Malayalam, Tamil side by side, you can see how similar and how different they are. Because Brahmi looks very geometric, very unusual, whereas Grantha, Malayalam, Tamil looks quite similar. Some letters are almost similar in all three scripts. Some are very different, but most of them are quite rounded. And I'll just take three scripts and I take two letters and just to see how different and how similar they can be. As an example, you can see that all three, the first line looks quite similar but still quite markedly different. So you can say that, the first row shows them, the column shows them to be, quite circular and squarish, whereas the second one is more rounded, loopy rather. But Malayalam becomes a little more simple but more rounded. So some people call Ezhuthu as the father of the script because he is supposed to have collected all the existing scripts and put together a single script for the language. So he's considered the father of Malayalam. So that happened around 14th century Christian era. And at present, Malayalam has around 15 vowels and 36 consonants. And they are looking something like this right now. And there are some chillers, which is quite unique to Malayalam. And there are some modifier signs used to add the vowels to the consonants. But there are hundreds of conjuncts, like many of the Indian scripts, in the last count, they say there are around 800 of conjuncts. These are all the combination of vowels plus conjuncts. Vowels and consonants and consonants and consonants. They could be nearly 800, it seems. And all South Indian scripts used to be written on palm leaf strips, because this material was abundantly available in the subcontinent. And they used to use a metal stylus to inscribe on it. And the way it was written is very interesting. They used to hold the stylus vertically on the strip and then used to engrave it. And then they'll smear some black powder on it to make it visible. So two kinds of handwriting existed in this kind of script. So one is quite rounded, loopy, because one theory says, when that's inscribed on the palm leaf, it used to skid. And so the scripts used to become a little rounded. But equally plausible was another explanation, because there is another version which had a little bit more squarish elements in it, because it's easier to write straight as well on the script. So both theories exist. So if you look at these two scripts, which are very closely connected, Tamil and Malayalam, you can see that the first one is a little bit more squarish than the second one, which is purely rounded. And when the initial handwriting used to be done in Malayalam on paper also, there were two versions existing. One was very rounded and other could be slightly squarish. So these two styles existed side by side. So naturally, when the first book was printed in Malayalam, in fact, it was printed in Rome, to be frank, so they took the squarish version and printed it. So the person who knew that, got the sample, didn't know probably what the language was, and he just imitated it. And that's how the first printed book was done in Malayalam from Rome. That is Samsheva Vedartham. It was done in 1772 with mobile type. And if you look at the style, it's a mix of both round and square. And in fact, when Bodoni made his first manual typographic in 1818, compiling all the existing scripts in the world, he used the same typeface to show a Malabarico script in it. And the first book printed in India was printed in Bombay by the Courier Press in 1799. They also use the same form of letterforms because obviously they tried to imitate the printed form which was existing then. So they tried to imitate it, slightly larger letterforms, otherwise the forms are exactly same. And it took a foreigner, an Englishman, Benjamin Bailey, who came to the place Kerala, Kottayam city, and started a CMS press in 1824. So he wanted to print Bible in Malayalam to spread the gospel. So he got a letterform done with local help, and that is the first Malayalam font which had a purely rounded form. So that was in 1824. But of course, it wasn't anything like a font as such because it was more like a handwriting. And the best thing about him, Bailey wasn't happy with the output he got, and he worked on it on his own, learning the nuances of type design and improved the font over the several years. And so the letterforms progressively became rounded and rounded. So he's also the person who brought in modulated strokes into Malayalam because the first typeface that he made had mono-weight characters. So he also tried to introduce the existing style in Latin forms with these contrasted strokes. So he introduced that, which has become the most popular form now in Malayalam. And another foreigner, a German at that, Hermann Gundert, he also helped a lot in making Malayalam script still rounder. So he was almost a contemporary of Bailey. Yeah, but by the way, Hermann Gundert is a great-grandfather of Hermann Hesse, the Nobel Prize author, who wrote Siddhartha, among other books. So he also helped a lot in making the script even more rounder. So initially he did with lithographs, but after that, he felt he also got the printed type from Bailey to print his books, but he wasn't happy with that, so he still worked on it and made it still rounder. So after these two pioneers made the script quite standardized with some amount of harmony, some amount of standardization, local artists and local letter makers also got into action, and they added more roundness to the script, making roundness the leitmotif of the script. And of course, the big companies, Monotype came in 70s when newspapers became popular. So they produced their own fonts, which were based on the existing hot metal phases in the script. They modified it, standardized it further. And in the 80s, linotype also came in when photo composing was introduced. So they also reinforced this style even more. Over time, the script became very rounded, very elegant, very beautiful. The last line shows, how from a squarish form it evolved, got standardized, and got rounder, and the exide got even. The inner spaces became much more standardized, and so that shows the transformation from the first printed type to the contemporary typefaces. So, as it goes, any design discipline, after it has reached a certain point of perfection, validates itself by applying geometric principles. So we saw such instances in the Roman type. Albert Dürer tried to give classic proportions to the English type in 1470s. So did Geoffrey Torrey in 1480s to 1530s. And Edward Johnston tried to make it even more geometric during the 1870s to 1940s. So this was the trend in every script. So there are more instances, the Trajan alphabets could be broken down into geometric forms, and as the theory goes, Baskerville was built upon geometric principles, and so also Bodoni. Future is obviously geometric font, so is geometric principles quite strong in Gilsaw. Well, if you look at Malayalam forms, over time, these geometry has crept into Malayalam knowingly or unknowingly. And if you analyze them, letter forms, it's become remarkably geometric. And I was quite fascinated by this universal skeleton theory of Adrian Frutiger in 1998. According to him, every alphabet, has an innate skeleton based on which, you can make various variations to it. So applying these principles I was working on a universal skeleton for Malayalam letter forms, I picked and chose 3 forms from various eras, and I tried to find the universal skeleton in Malayalam letter forms. And looking at the writing directions in Malayalam, it's quite interesting. Most of them are written in the clockwise direction. Some are written in the anti-clockwise direction, and there are some which uses both directions. So some part is written in anti-clockwise, and there's an inflection point, and from where it changes to clockwise. So you can actually group all letters into clockwise direction, anti-clockwise direction, and a mixed writing directions. And if you look at them, they're equally distributed. And if you examine the forms, you could actually group them into, let's say, few sets, which have purely rounded forms, which have some element of squarishness in it, some loops in it, multiple loops in it, or the hairpin-like appendage to it, more of squarishness in it, and an upper extending loop to it. So these are the various ways you can classify Malayalam letter forms. Another way of looking at the scheme is also quite interesting. Single module, 2 modules, 3 modules, multiple modules. So you can actually study them in various different ways. And a few alphabets in Malayalam are purely symmetric as well. Some have left to right symmetry, some have top bottom symmetry. So it is getting even more geometric if you look at that. So as I said, in fact, one of the eminent Malayalam writer and literary critic, he used to say that there's no doubt that the elegance of Malayalam letters is in their roundness. So over years, as I said, we have been using geometry in a big way to bring in elegance and beauty into these letter forms. In fact, all of us, my parents, every parent that does that, school teachers also ask children to write the letter forms as round as possible, because that is the way Malayalam should look like. Script has become identified with roundness. So I'm working on this as a PhD. So I've been examining the geometric study of Malayalam letter forms, and I found that when you overlap letter forms and try to extract the geometry part from it, it creates some fascinating models. So I took the linotype model, the monotype model, and another font, and I tried to overlap them and extract the geometry out of it. So I did that across many letters. It's still going on, not over yet. So there is a geometric skeleton to it. So it creates some interesting forms, and almost all letters can be defined geometrically. So most of the shapes are round. There are a few straight lines as well. So if you put them all side by side, they all have a common geometry, mostly based on circles. And if you look at them closer, you can actually see that, most of the Malayalam letter forms can be defined with 6 circles and 2 lines. So my question is, and I'm working on it still, so can they be defined completely as a set of circles and lines, so that it becomes easy to construct them, or it can be given to AI to construct or generate forms with pure geometric equations? So then I need to find out the ideal ratios of these circles or ideal combinations of these lines. So that's a work in progress. So I also have a small video to explain this process to you. Can I play the video? Not visible? Yeah. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for the impressive work. So we have time for the Q&A. So, we have.
Thank you for your great talk. I think your talk was really connected to Matthew's talk in the morning, so it was easier for native people to understand further. So I thought Malayalam has some similarities with Hangul, because Hangul also has kind of geometric and sans serif-ish nature from the beginning, because when King Sejong first created Hangul back in 1443, he wanted all the citizens to learn it easily and use it freely with just stick in the ground. So I wanted to know further, is there more reason for Malayalam to have these geometric form further than the reason that to make it elegant and easy to learn?
Well, I don't think there's any particular reason. It just evolved in a very natural way. Initially, it had a combination of circles and straight lines, but over years, it became more rounder and rounder. Now it's become almost pure geometry. Maybe it has something to do with the landscape, which has something to do with the easy way of life, Could be that, but there's no particular reason, I believe. Nobody has imposed geometry into it, but it naturally evolved.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you. A great talk. Thoroughly enjoyed it. This question about the script reform.
Yeah.
So there was the traditional Malayalam script, and then there was a reformed Malayalam, and then more recently something in between came, right?
Right.
So what would you recommend for a new type designer who's trying to do a fresh typeface for Malayalam, assuming he's a non-native speaker? What's the most commonly used form? Is there a standard definition, or is something that the designer has to figure out himself?
Right. So yeah, you're right. Malayalam went through some script reforms. So, but the basic letter forms are still the same. The vowels and consonants are same. Only regarding the number of conjuncts, there is a little confusion. So every font designer will create the basic ones first and can extend the conjuncts as much as you want. So the open type allows you to give combinations, with or without choices. So that is fine. So it's up to the font designer to choose. So there are some people who strictly believe that the reform script is better. So they choose to only do the limited set. But there are traditional people who want the entire set to be done. So they do that as well. So now recently I saw one of the fonts done by Typotech or something, somebody. So they did both. So you can actually choose the option, the traditional or modern.
So is it something like Devanagari, where you can either have the half-form conjuncts or full-form conjuncts?
Right, yeah, same thing.
Okay,
I think
so
all
people
Indian scripts, yeah.
In other words, the people are acceptable to both. So if your font doesn't have a full-form conjunct, you can fall back to the one with the Chandra Bindu.
Right. So I think all Indian scripts have this problem, They had gone through a lot of transformations. So there is still a confusion whether you should go the full modern or traditional or somewhere in between. That will keep on going for some time, I believe. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Did I cut in line? Thank you for your talk. I'm fascinated by the evolution of script that goes from a very simple same width primitive implements on primitive materials to then get transformed, often by foreigners, into some font-like, typographic-like system. And then as we get into digital typography and supporting this in a more free digital medium, having to answer questions that never were answered or never asked in the past when things were written all in the same size, for example. Do you you find that the way digital typography works with the current Malayalam fonts, that the way that type is placed in the design space, and were you to double the size in the same line, would the alignment points be inadequate? And do you think that should it be a center-based script? Should it be hung from some kind of a top line? Should it be, are there new rules that we will have to invent because we are pushing a language that never had this kind of free design into technology that does allow for more free design, but then it means that you're answering questions and making up rules that didn't really exist. You have no historic stone to look at that gave you all the answers. So for your perspective, what kinds of limitations do we need to break through, and what things do we need to introduce in the digital world?
Yeah, you're right, because most of these inventions or interventions in Malayalam script has been influenced very much by the happenings in the Latin script, because as we saw, Benjamin Bailey brought in harmonization, standardization, so did Herman Gundert also. So they found the best things that is happening in the West, and they tried to adapt it to Malayalam. So again, the printing machines were same, the letterpress machines, offset printing, all came from the Western technology. So we're all trying to adapt to the Western means and methods of production. So yes, those have influenced us really well. And as you rightly said, but certain Indian scripts do hang from the top, but Malayalam it goes from the baseline. So it is more like Western scripts. So it doesn't have the handicaps that the other scripts have. It's a simpler form as well. So it can still be controlled within the limitations of the normal Latin letter forms, So we were quite, I would say, lucky, or we had certain advantages in that to reform it further and standardize it further. So that is one of the reasons why it became all the more geometric.
Okay, yeah. Actually, there are some very interesting points that personally I would like to ask him, but we have time limited, and so thank you very much. And
yeah, thank you.